Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to our fourth quarter 2016 American Horse Council webinar. We've entitled this Embracing Change, and we are delighted to have three really great speakers who are all speaking about very relevant topics that bring change to the equine industry. Let me give you a few logistics and then we'll get started. I'm Julie Broadway, the American Horse Council President, and we will be recording this afternoon's session, so it will be available for people to review at their leisure from our website. We would encourage you to put your phone on mute to minimize background noise, and after each presenter, we will allow a few minutes for questions. And the way you should submit your questions is to look on your screen at the top bar that is in gray, and at the right you will find a conversation symbol. It looks like a little bubble, and you can click there and submit your questions, and we will review those questions and have our presenters respond to those. So Ashley, I believe you are ready to take us over to the next slide. There I am. Nice to see all of you. Okay, so our first presenter is Ben Pendergrass. Ben is the Senior Vice President of Policy and Legislative Affairs here at the American Horse Council in Washington, D.C. In this capacity, Ben works on a wide range of legislative and regulatory issues that impact the equestrian community. He has over 13 years' experience working in and with Congress and federal agencies here in D.C., and before joining us, Ben served as a legislative aide. He is a native of New Mexico and a graduate of Tulane University, and I will turn the floor to Ben.
Good afternoon. I'm going to speak briefly about the presidential and congressional elections that we recently had and their potential impact on the horse industry. Unless you've been living in a cave, you're probably aware that Donald Trump has won the presidential election. Republicans have held on to a slim majority in the Senate and have maintained a large majority in the House. Next slide, Ashley. What do we know about the new administration priorities, particularly ones that could impact the horse industry? We know that increased... Ashley, can you go back 2 slides?
There you go.
Thank you. We know that increased immigration and border enforcement will certainly be a priority for this administration. We know tax reform is a high priority of both the administration and Congress. We know there will likely be a moratorium on all new regulations and a review of current regulations. We know that increased oil and gas drilling and other extraction activities are a priority of this administration, and we know that there might be possible changes to trade policy. What we don't know is quite a bit. Because President-elect Trump does not have a public record in office, there are many issues that we simply don't know how his administration will handle. Mr. Trump does not have a public position on many issues relating to the horse industry, such as welfare, horse processing, recreation trails, that we will be looking for clues in as he picks cabinet members and other officials in his administration, and we will be following those things closely. Next slide, Ashley. Changes in Congress. We did see a few retirements, some losses, and we will certainly see some new faces. It's of particular note that Senator Kelly Ayotte lost her bid for re-election. Senator Ayotte was the principal sponsor of the PAST Act in the Senate, which was strongly supported by the American Horse Council, as well as the retirement of Congresswoman Cynthia Lummis. She was the principal sponsor of the National Forest Trail Stewardship Act, which was also strongly supported by the American Horse Council, which we are still hopeful may pass in the lame duck Congress. Through retirements and losses, there will be approximately 63 new members of the House of Representatives and 6 new senators. So we will see quite a few new faces in the coming new Congress. We will have some new committee chairs. The House Energy and Commerce Committee and Appropriations Committee chairs are both term limited, and so we'll have to step down and give up their gavels, and we will see who will take over those committees. They're usually important to the horse industry, and so we will be looking for those announcements in the coming weeks. There will be possible changes to Senate committee leadership as committee assignments would change, possible political appointments to the new administration, but we don't know exactly what those will be yet. Next slide, Ashley. So what does all this mean for the horse industry? Tax reform could certainly be good for businesses, including horse businesses. We anticipate they will try to get a simplified tax code and one with lower overall rates for business, and it might be an opportunity to make things like 3-year depreciation of racehorses permanent. It might be an opportunity to institute important reforms to the H-2B and H-2A regulations as they're currently structured. Right now, under the current administration, there have been some guest worker regulations that we view as being overly burdensome, and we would expect there to be an opportunity with the new administration to potentially roll back some of those regulations or to reform these important programs as part of any broader immigration bill is introduced in Congress. Trade policies could impact the industry. The horse industry is global in nature, and we both export and import horses, and any changes to trade agreements could impact that. Changes to NAFTA could have impact on the export of horses to Canada and Mexico for horse processing. So that would be something that could happen. To prevent all storing tactics act, the PAST Act is definitely in a different position than it was because of the loss of Senator Kelly Ayotte, and we will now have to identify a new principal Republican sponsor in the Senate if that bill is to be reintroduced. The proposed Horse Protection Act regulations that were recently in a comment period are now being considered by the USDA. If they are not made final by the end of this administration, according to everything that has been said, this administration will likely not extend any regulatory work that was ongoing in the Obama administration. So if those are not final, they will likely not go and be implemented. Even if they are made final, they could be subject to review and potential revision under a new administration. Trails and recreation on public land could be impacted by the new administration. With the focus on drilling, extraction, opening more land up to these activities, recreation could be adversely impacted. There might not be appropriations for trails, trail maintenance could be squeezed, and programs such as the Recreational Trails Program could come under threat. However, there might be opportunities to ensure residents have access to public lands and are not unduly barred or somehow prohibited from recreating could be an opportunity in this situation. The long and the short of it is, with the new administration and new Congress, there are still a lot of things we don't know. As with all new administrations, there will be some opportunities and there will be some challenges. But these are some of the main things we will be keeping our eye on as the new Congress and new president take their seat in January. I'm happy to take a question or two.
If you have a question for Ben, you can either use the icon that's on your screen to submit that question, or if you can take yourself off mute briefly, you can ask your question live. For those of you who have just joined us, we are recording this webinar, and it will be available on our website. Ben, I think you have completely covered the subject for this attendees.
Well, thank you, and that's all from me.
Thank you. So our next speaker is David Foley. He's the Executive Director at the American Association of Equine Practitioners. David has been with AAEP since 1988, and he was named the Executive Director in March of 2000. David is a native of Louisville and a graduate of the University of Kentucky. He is very involved with the American Society of Association Executives, and he's a certified association executive. And he's been active in the equine industry and in associations and served on numerous committees, including here at the American Horse Council, the National Thoroughbred Racing Association, and PATH International. He currently serves on the board of the Racetrack Chaplaincy of America, Bluegrass Farms Chaplaincy, and the American Society of Veterinary Medical Association Executives. So we're pleased to have David with us this afternoon.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
There you are. Yes.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to give this kind of an introduction to AAEP and go through, some of our demographics and structure, as well as talk about some of our priorities and activities a little bit more, and about the equine veterinary profession as well. So, Ashley, next slide. There you go. Okay, thank you. We were formed in 1954 at the Brown Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky by 11 racetrack veterinarians, and these are not them. This is just the oldest picture I could find. But it was formed because there were a lot of issues happening at the racetrack that the AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, is really beyond their scope. And so they tasked these racetrack vets to get together and try to address some of these issues. After that first meeting, the group felt that there was really a need for specific education and information sharing amongst the equine veterinary profession, so they formed their own association, the AAEP. Next slide, please. So fast forwarding 60-some-odd years later, we're currently standing at about just a little over 9,500 veterinary student members. We have members in the U.S., Canada, and over 62 countries around the world. With outside of the U.S. and Canada, our biggest membership areas are in Australia, Germany, and Mexico. Here in the United States, of course, California, Texas, and Florida are probably our three largest membership states, which makes sense. That's probably where most of the horses are. Next slide. A few more demographic information. By and large, most of our members work exclusively on horses. In fact, 44% do nothing but equine work, and then another large percent, 3/4 or more. Then it kind of breaks down after that. As far as the type of practice is concerned, about a third of them work on the performance horse, the non-racing performance horse, pleasure, farm, sort of the backyard horse make up about a third, 11%. That vacillates 11, 12, 13%, depending on the year, are involved directly at the racetrack. Repro, a small percentage working in academia and industry, and then work in ranch. On the right-hand side, you'll see the sort of the gender breakdown. The interesting thing here, this was, of course, for many, many years, a predominantly male-oriented profession. That's changed dramatically the last few years. In fact, probably 85% of all veterinary students are female. And our student demographic numbers are more like 87 female, 13% male. So it's changing dramatically, but it's still pretty close in terms of our overall membership as far as the gender breakout is concerned. The first 5 years out of veterinary school are what we consider our most at-risk members to keep in the profession, and if they make it past 5-6 years as an equine practitioner, it they're generally stay for the long haul. If they get out of the equine profession, at that point they will oftentimes morph into small animal veterinarians, and mostly it's because of salary and lifestyle issues. Equine veterinarians don't make as much money right out of school as as a small animal vet. It takes about 6 or 7 years of being in the profession to catch up and exceed that level from an income standpoint, and of course the hours are not particularly good. There's a lot of 6 and 7 day weeks, and so salary and lifestyle issues are the number one reason why that new graduate is probably what we consider our most at-risk member for retention in the profession and in the association. The other thing is that they get out of school and they've got about an average of $200,000 worth of student debt from veterinary school. Next slide. Thank you. Like a lot of associations, we started in some guy's basement, and General Sage Kester was one of our founding members and was our first executive director for many, many years, and the office was headquartered and run by he and his wife out of his basement in Golden, Colorado. The association got professional management back in the mid-'80s and moved the offices to Lexington. In 1990, we built our first building out of the Kentucky Horse Park. Next slide. And then just in February of 2015, we opened our brand new headquarters building just on the other side of the parking lot from the horse park, and doubled our size and moved into a new building where we currently are housed. Next slide. Just a quick slide about staff structure. This is just sort of how we're broken out. We've got kind of 4 main departments: marketing, communications and public relations, finance and operations, which oversees all of our meetings as well, and physical plant, membership, of course, and then Keith Klein is our industry relations director, which encompasses our foundation, sponsorship programs, advocacy efforts, as well as the Equine Disease Communications Center. And we likely we have 21 staff members now currently, and we'll likely add another department next year, probably for IT. Next slide, please. These are just some of our governance tools that we use. Of course, we have everything is run by a mission statement and our long-range goals. These 2 documents don't change, and our long-range goals really sort of serve as our vision statement, if you will, what we aspire to be. And then down there at the bottom, you can see that we also do strategic planning, and that changes every 3 to 4 years a little bit. We go through that planning process on every third or fourth year. Next slide, please. That process starts every year or every time with a comprehensive membership survey where we measure what's important to our members and as well as how satisfied they are with our efforts in them, and then run a gap analysis to see areas that we need to focus the next planning cycle. These were a few key takeaways on this last cycle. Quality of life issues that had the biggest gap was in a really important issue to members, and they didn't feel like we were addressing them sufficiently. So that's a big piece of our next strategic plan. Lay people providing veterinary services, most of that comes in the forms of equine dentistry being performed by a lay person, and then, of course, ethics in the profession. Those 5 areas down there were legislative or public policy concerns. Some of them are similar to the top 3: performance horse medication, regulation, horse slaughter issue, revisions in state practice acts. Next slide, please. Current strategic plan has 5 main goals: enhancing member value, and probably a lot of your own strategic plans would have a lot of similar attributes. Enhancing member value. Who doesn't want to enhance the value of your membership? Communications and technology, providing world-class continuing education, quality of life and wellness issues, and then promoting the profession. Next slide, please. To dig into these a little bit more, we have a touch program that we began in our last planning cycle, and this was really based on a lot of horse owner research on what services and what they wanted to see in their equine veterinarian. And so this is a whole, and this could be its own webinar, this is a whole website full of tools and resources to help our members connect more with their clients and provide the services that their clients want from them. And so we want to continue to expand and build the tools in that touch program. We want to develop more AAEP exclusive member benefits, things that they can only get by being a member of the organization. Improve our communication of our existing benefits. We feel like we're communicating all the time and that we offer a lot of great benefits, but maybe members don't know about that, so that's a piece of that. Membership customization, that's a big thing with a lot of organizations these days, and that's trying to tailor membership to provide the individual the specific things that they want out of their relationship with the organization. And then the solo and 1 to 3 doctor practices. This group makes up nearly 70% of our overall membership are in 1 and 2 doctor practices. And so we're looking at ways that we can improve the value that we offer this particular demographic. Next slide. Communications and technology. We feel like we're a little bit behind the curve when it comes to IT. We're not really happy with our website, and we've been working almost a full year over 2016, and we'll be launching a brand new website at the first of the year, which hopefully will have a much improved navigation and be much more of a resource to our members. We need to improve our internal IT capacity, as I mentioned previously on the staff chart, that we may be adding that as its own department. A communications assessment. We took a part of the membership survey, that bullet point of responsiveness, and this really kind of caught our eye when we were talking about when we surveyed our members and their satisfaction with our communications to them. And in 2011, when we asked this survey, 83% felt that we were responsive. In this last survey, that number dropped to 68%. So that caught our eye, and so we're trying to take a deeper dive in that area to improve our communications to our members and our responsiveness on issues. Next slide. World-class continuing education, and this is really the number one thing we do is provide education to our members, and so we want to continue to create a culture of innovation. We want people coming to our events and conferences and it always be to stay a leader in that area in terms of equine veterinary continuing education. We do continuing education needs assessments with our members every couple of years to make sure that the programming that we put on is in fact member driven, and we want to make sure that we keep an emphasis on our annual convention, which is really kind of our flagship event. Next slide. Quality of life and wellness issues. These came out big on our member survey. They're the number one reason that first 5 years out of vet school group is considered at risk. There is a very high suicide rate amongst the veterinary profession. It's not just equine, it's the veterinary profession as a whole. It's something that the AVMA and all the other species-specific groups are trying to get their hands around as well. And so we are collaborating with others in the veterinary profession to develop tools and resources to try to help our members address some of these things. A lot of it is financial, physical, emotional health issues, and so there'll be a new section on our new website that has a lot of resource materials on wellness issues. We're incorporating wellness activities into our continuing education events, trying to create more connection for members to address some of that. Mentorship programs for new graduates. The veterinary student has a lot of support in school. And in fact, many colleges of veterinary medicine have an affiliation with the College of Social Work as well to give those students the support that they need. But when they graduate and go out into practice, they often don't have that same support, and many of them feel like they're sort of out there on their own. And so we're looking at developing a mentorship program to help in that regard. Next slide. And then the last of the strategic plan goals is to promote the profession, quite simply, which means an increased outreach to stakeholders to really promote the value of using an equine veterinarian, and then stronger advocacy through more advanced governmental relations. And really, our activity with governmental relations is really kind of goes through two channels. So if it's a veterinary issue, we work with the American Veterinary Medical Association's Washington office. If it's an equine issue, of course, we're very involved with the Horse Council on that in those areas, and there is some overlap. But that's really the best way we approach governmental relations. Next slide. As I mentioned before, continuing education is really job number one here, and that's the main member benefit that we do. And we have a number of meetings during the year. This is just the conferences that we had this past year. Student programs, repro, soft tissue lameness, a wet lab that we do out of Colorado State, and then, of course, our annual convention's upcoming. Next slide. Of course, many of you are probably familiar with our annual convention. We're expecting about 6,000 or more people to come to Orlando this December for 5 days of scientific programming, committee meetings, social functions, and a 600-booth trade show. And this is really our flagship event, and it's something that we work on year-round. Next slide. Of course, we have an active committee structure. Though we've reduced the number the last few years as part of a kind of a governance restructuring, but welfare and public policy and racing and professional conduct and ethics are very instrumental committees with us. The infectious disease committee is new this past year. We have a couple of ongoing task forces at any given time. Currently one working on judicious antimicrobial use, which is a big issue in both human and veterinary medicine, stem cell guidelines, and then we've got a task force working on performance horse welfare issues as well. A shameless plug for the foundation. We've also got a C3 foundation that's been around for about 25 years now. It's the charitable arm of the AAEP. The main focus is on research and benevolence, education, but also we get involved with disaster relief efforts when Hurricane Katrina hit, really kind of ramped that part of the foundation up. And then, of course, the Equine Disease Communication Center. We're given anywhere from $350,000 to $400,000 or so a year out. A lot of it is funding for veterinary student scholarships and things like that, but also benevolence efforts and doing some research funding, laminitis research, a recently announced collaboration with Grayson on EIPH research as well. Next slide. Next slide, please. Back up. There you go. One more. Thank you. And then, of course, industry involvement. We're very involved with both the horse industry and the veterinary profession. And AAP is a founding member of the Unwanted Horse Coalition, the Time to Ride Marketing Initiative, the Racing Medication and Testing Consortium, and then the Unwanted Horse Veterinary Relief Campaign. Next slide. Thank you. Well, that's all I have for today.
Well, thank you, David.
Quick snapshot.
That's a great snapshot of AAEP, and we're delighted that you are such a close partner with us here at the American Horse Council. Anybody have questions for David today? Well, I'll just close by a shameless plug for AAEP. David mentioned their conference is coming up in Orlando. It's December the 3rd through the 7th, I think, David, is correct?
Uh-huh.
Some great content, some wonderful material there, and Cliff Williamson and I from the American Horse Council are looking forward to being with you guys. I encourage everybody to check that out. Okay, so our third speaker today is Kimberly, or Kim Brown. Kim has worked in the equine publishing industry for over 35 years. She's currently the associate publisher and editor for 2 publications with Active Interest Media. Today she's going to be speaking with us about a recent survey that was done from Stable Management Magazine, which focuses on farms, stable owners, and riding instructors. This survey was published. The results of it were published in their fall 2016 issue, and I found it fascinating, Kim, to read some of the data that you have there. So we're looking forward to hearing about that. And Kim began her journalism career in 1980 when she worked for Blood Horse Publications in Lexington. She continued to be involved in a leadership role in a number of publications, and she went to work for AIM in 2012. So, Kim, talk to us about the survey results and what you guys learned from this.
Well, thanks very much, Julie. I really appreciate you having me on here today. We like to do surveys, and I think if you don't ask people questions, then sometimes you may not get the answers that you were thinking about. So we first published surveys in 2012 with Stable Management, and this is a publication that has been around for several decades, but it was one of those that during the recession, as we know, a lot of things in the horse industry had struggles. This magazine ended up being a very active website, and we ended up purchasing it at Active Interest Media and are in the process of building it back. And it was interesting that when we surveyed the people when we first bought this website, they said, we want our magazine back. So we're in the process of, we publish 2 magazines a year currently. We have surveys twice a year in these magazines, and the Fall Business Survey is the one we're going to talk a little bit about today. So next slide. One of the things we noticed in this survey, if you look at the very bottom number, this is the first time since 2012 we haven't seen a progression in the business is up column. And we were a little concerned about that, or I was when I read the survey. We noticed that as the industry is moving forward, that we maybe not are seeing as much progress and recovery as some of us thought we were. And when you look at this, you notice that about 36% of these respondents this year said their business was down. And that is compared, you can see the numbers at the bottom of the slide, back in 2012, you had a lot of people, over 60% said their business was down. So it's much better than it was when the recession was early in its stages. But, when you still have, almost 40% of your businesses saying that it was down from the previous year, that's a cause of concern for us. Next slide, Ashley. So who are the people that we surveyed? And some of the people that we looked at are, members of our website, magazine subscribers, people in our industry. Let's go to the next slide, and we'll look at this a little more closely. We have barn and farm owners and managers, instructors, breeders, and employees, and we allowed people to pick the top 3 positions they hold at the facility, and you'll notice a little change in some of it. You'll also notice that the number of trainers and instructors grew quite a bit in 2015. That's when we started partnering with the Certified Horsemanship Association and the PATH International Certified Riding Centers. So we had a lot more trainers and instructors start receiving our magazine those years. So that's why you see the jumps in those numbers. But the majority of people that we're talking to here own or manage their barn or farm. Next slide, please. And what we have found out about these people, and this has stayed pretty consistent over the years, that these are smart people. They have undergraduate or advanced degrees, almost 80% of them. They're making $50,000 a year at least. Some of them are making quite a bit of money from their equine businesses. If you look on this, you'll notice that over 30% said their equine business was a secondary income in their household. And over 40% said that they were the only employee at the facility. In other words, they own it, run it, and are doing all the work themselves. And you'll notice that they're working a lot of hours. They pretty much are acting as their own barn managers. And if they do have managers or staff, you'll notice that they really aren't paying benefits. That means insurance or days off or paid vacation. And looking at the biggest expenses, these haven't changed a lot in the last few years. Hay and feed went down a little bit this year, and that's probably because the gas prices have been reduced. The one thing that did go up was mortgage. A lot of people have noted in this year's survey that their mortgages were increased almost double. That was a concern for them. Next slide, please. So one of the things we would like to see, and David mentioned it and Julie has mentioned it, that the American Horse Council works with Time to Ride. We are focusing on Time to Ride, trying to reach out to mostly mothers with small children, because we would like to see that generational. We'd like to see the mothers, grandmothers, children, grandchildren, all out there on horses, because as we grow our industry, we will have more people to provide our services to. But one of the things that we really haven't looked at that is a concern to me that I've seen in our surveys, you can go to the next slide, please, is that our industry is aging. And we've seen this, and it's not new. You know, there's a lot of veterinarians that are aging. A lot of people in different industries are aging. Farm and stable owners are aging too. And there's a huge question of who is going to come in and take over these farms, because it's great we can bring in as many people as we want to into the industry, but if there's no outlet for them to take lessons or board their horses or have a place to go ride, then we have another area in our industry that is of great concern. And when you look at the age of our respondents, you know, almost 70% are over 50. So these are people that are closing in on retirement age, and whether they're going to keep their equine businesses up as stables and boarding operations is a concern, I think, to our industry. Next slide, please. And you look at these, and, you know, you've got almost 50% of our respondents saying that they've been in the industry more than 30 years. And the percentage of people who are in 10 or less is not very high. So not only do we need to bring people in, I think, in our industry to be beginner riders and beginner horse owners and get back into the industry maybe after being out of it for years or decades, we need to try and bring people into the business side of farm and stable ownership. Next slide, please. And when we look at the people who have these and ask them, you know, where are they making their money and what is the most important part of their business, and we ask them in 2014, you know, we always ask, what would you change in this? And in 2015 and 16, we allowed them to pick the top 3 things that they were discussing, you know, that they said were their primary areas of focus in their business. And so you'll notice a little change in some of these from 14 to 15 and then on to 16. But as you see, boarding, in other words, someone else pays them to keep their horse on their property, is still the top. Lessons, you would expect that with the CHA and the PATH people in there. Training is what we define as actually training horses. Trail riding is an interesting, that was one that has risen dramatically as we've seen, I think, maybe some of our efforts in trying to get people interested in the industry. You know, that's one of the first places they'll go, is to take beginner lessons or maybe go on a trail ride. And you see competitions, we are seeing them, you know, continue to increase. Breeding, which is, I thought this was very encouraging to me because the breeding industry seems to have increased a little bit. Therapeutic riding we've added in there just because a lot of our stables have started working with programs, and of course we have the PATH people who only are involved with therapeutic riding. And then children's camps is something that with Time to Ride we have been looking at, you know, trying to see how do we get more of these young people involved. Next slide, please. We asked, starting in 2015, you know, what type of horses do you have on your property? And so you've got a lot of horse owners who are these equine people. So they've taken their passion for their own horses and they're allowing other people to share in that passion. So, you know, that's an area we need to keep in mind, that the current people who own horses are our people who are helping bring others into our industry and maintaining places where they can keep their horses. Next slide, please. And here we asked, starting last year, you know, we wanted to see how many boarders and clients do you have. And I think it's interesting that, you know, the very bottom of the slide, we've got quite a few that have more than 25 boarders or clients. So we probably have some very large farm managers and owners who are taking these surveys. And, you know, as you can see, there's a thoroughbred farm at the bottom. They most of the time will have more than 25 clients per farm. But it's nice to see that the mid-ranges are also maintaining or even increasing just a little bit with the number of boarders and clients. Next slide, please. And this year we just asked them, how has your business been? You know, have you had an increase in your numbers of boarders and clients? And you'll notice there that almost 36% said that they had an increase in how many boarders and clients they've had in the last year. But then again, we had almost 28% that said they had a slight decrease. But one of the interesting things at the bottom is there's almost 11% of the people surveyed that said they aren't seeking to change. It means they are not actively looking for new people to come into their facility or their business. Next slide, please. We also asked for the first time this year, how many horses are on your property? Do you own or do you manage? And it will be interesting to see in the future how this number changes and to see if these numbers rise or decrease as the case may be as we move forward and hopefully recover more from this recession. And that's all we were going to cover today. This article about this and with more statistics is available on stablemanagement.com. And there's other surveys that you can see there. And I encourage you to sign up for our weekly newsletter. We have new news and updates every day on the website. And then the magazine comes out twice a year. And it's absolutely free to those who want to get on the website and sign up to get it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kim, so much. I know that you titled your presentation Mixed Signals, but I saw a lot of opportunities, little nuggets that were embedded in the survey results that tell me that there's room for growth, that young professionals that are coming on can certainly find their business niche, and there's some great possibilities out there.
I agree with you, Julie.
Excellent. Anybody have questions for Kim? Well, I'll take this opportunity to also piggyback off of Kim's survey results and make sure that the attendees understand that the American Horse Council is going to be launching a new economic impact study in 2017. The purpose of an economic impact study is to examine the effect an event or an industry has on the economy. It will measure not just the number of horses or the number of jobs, but the overall economic impact that we have. This has been almost 10 years since an economic impact study was done, and we still have a number of people that call us to get the data from years ago, so we know it's widely used, but we do think it's appropriate and it's timely that we have some updated statistics to work with, and we have some data that we can use when we are talking with individuals about the equine industry and what the implications of that are. It helps us tremendously in educating the public and the media and elected officials, whether they be at the national level or at the state level, about the importance of the industry. So I'm looking forward to that, Kim, because I'm hoping we will see some similar patterns, or maybe not. Maybe we'll see some different numbers that will be a little more encouraging in some places. But we're eager to see that happen. The study will start in the spring of 2017, and we should have the final report available in the fall. We hope at about August or September. The study is not inexpensive to undertake, so we are fundraising to underwrite the cost of this study. And if you would like more information, feel free to contact us here at the American Horse Council to learn about how to get involved in the study. And we have been working with a number of different associations and state horse councils to begin the process of compiling the surveys that we will be used and how we will circulate those surveys and that kind of thing. And I'm happy to address any questions if anybody has anything about the economic impact study. Or if there are other questions that the group has that you'd like for us to address this afternoon, we'd be happy to entertain those. quiet crowd today. Okay, well, thank you so much for attending. I will encourage you to stay in tune with the schedule for our next webinar. It will be in February of 2017, and we believe our guest speaker will be someone from NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, and they will be talking about climate change and the implications of climate change on the equine industry, as well as a couple of other speakers, but we think that will be our primary topic that day. So thank you again for joining us. We will post this webinar very shortly to our website, so you'll have an opportunity to go back over the numbers or listen to the conversation again, and feel free to contact us afterwards if you have additional questions. So thank you, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, you too.